and welcome to the third episode of Mixed Media Reviews. My name is Kelsey, and today I'm going to be talking about a movie. And this week's movie is the Netflix original movie, Moxie. I was told that I'm a little bit quiet, so I'm going to be trying to talk with a more normal speaking voice so that the volume isn't so quiet. And still try to sound nice. So, we will see. Like most things I watched this past year, I just kind of clicked this after seeing the banner on Netflix with no trailer, no information about what it was going to even be about. I just saw there was a girl and it said Moxie, and I was like, sure, this looks like something I'd watch. Moxie is about Vivian, a 16-year-old girl who is inspired by a new classmate, Lucy. When Lucy asks the pertinent question, why are we still reading The Great Gatsby in class? This question, along with her mom Lisa, who is played by the amazing Amy Poehler, sparks an awakening in Vivian, and she begins to notice the sexist undertones of her daily life. Inspired by her mother's past activism, Vivian starts an anonymous zine, Moxie, and begins a revolution in her high school. Along with her best friend Claudia, she begins meeting up with other girls in her school who are tired of all the double standards and harassment they face. Together, the group of Moxie girls take a stand. Before I dive into what I liked, this episode is going to contain quite a few spoilers. So if you haven't seen the movie, I highly recommend you go and watch it now before continuing. I'm not going to reveal everything about the movie, but I'd like to go into more detail about it, and you can't really do that without some of the spoilers. This was also a book before it was a movie, and it was written by Jennifer Matu. I hopefully am saying that correctly. And you can check out her book of the same name if you're into that kind of thing, which I am. So I've already added it to my never-ending list of books to buy. I thought this movie was really well done, but before I get into some of the more detailed thoughts, I wanted to just talk overall about what I liked about this movie, and that's that I think it's really great for specifically young girls. It's also great for everyone else. But I like that it shows young girls a realistic behavior that, unfortunately, more likely than not, they will encounter during their life. And they showcase what is acceptable and not acceptable behavior through the character's actions and through the main character's kind of awakening to those actions. From her realizing Seth is nice to everyone to realizing Mitchell is more than just annoying. There is a line in the beginning of the film where one of the girls, Lucy, says, "I'm going to keep my head up, high," in response to Vivian, the main character, telling her to keep her head down until Mitchell finds someone else to bother. I thought that this was such a powerful line and such a powerful dialogue that the two have, which the whole scene I'll talk about more later, but I think it was really great to show that we don't need to lessen ourselves to get by, and we can just be who we want to be without apology. Didn't mean to rhyme, but that's okay. So Moxie starts out with a dream sequence. And in the dream, Vivian is running, she's scared, and she's in the woods. She goes to scream, but there's no sound. And this is such a, maybe cliched, but it's a great way, I think, to show how she's feeling and that she doesn't feel like she's in control of her life. And while her mom's message of feminism, standing up for yourself, calling out others, and not apologizing for being a woman, appears to be falling on deaf ears, this dream sequence shows that she's still listening, because deep down, she feels that weight too. She's still very receptive of the message, even though you see her kind of shying away from it in the beginning of the movie. And when she sees the new girl, Lucy, take that stand for herself to speak out, something awakens inside her. It just takes a fellow peer for her to be able to connect her subconscious with her conscious mind. One of the very first scenes we really see the way in which this school is kind of acquiescing to this current of sexism that runs through it is the scene where Mitchell, who's the quarterback of the football team, where he bothers the new girl Lucy at the soda machine. And it is just so well done, I think. From Lucy's awkward smile to the confident way in which he walks up and leans just a little too close. And by a little too close, I mean very much too close to her. The way he touches her and then tells her not to freak out when she says, "Don't touch me." We have this weird thing in society where we tell people to always make someone else comfortable, and we tend to cater to those who are more outgoing or more physical, and those who are quieter or maybe more withdrawn. We're taught to be uncomfortable for the sake of others. And quiet people are told they're too quiet and they need to talk more. And people who are slightly different are told to fit in. We see children being forced to hug a family member or a friend when they clearly don't want to. From a young age, this teaches us that what we want isn't important. It's what the other person wants that's important. And that our own consent isn't the focus. We see this so often that we tend to think it's normal. But it's not normal. And more often than not, this evolves into the type of situations like the one Lucy is in, where she's touched without permission, and when she makes a point to say, "Hey, I don't like this," instead of just allowing herself to be uncomfortable and silent, she gets told that she's the one causing a scene, that she's the one with the problem. And then, of course, her just stating her own boundaries instead of letting him do whatever he wants makes him upset to the point that he becomes aggressive, invading her space, hitting the machine, and ultimately spitting in her drink while staring right at her. After all of this, Lucy looks over to see Vivian silently watching the whole thing. Just yet another person who has internalized this behavior as something normal. A great line comes later when Vivian first approaches Lucy to tell her to just ignore Mitchell. And Lucy says, "Why should I have to ignore him? Why can't he just stop being edited a jerk?" And this is such a good point. This is from the discussion I mentioned earlier where Lucy ends it by saying that she's going to keep her head held up high. And why should we be making ourselves uncomfortable, making ourselves small, instead of making them change their behavior? We are not the ones with the problem. They are. If you can't accept that someone else doesn't want to be touched, then that's on you, not on the one who doesn't want to be touched. This movie tends to showcase a lot of the different double standards, which I really liked. From clothes to sports to behavior, it's not just one thing that they're commenting on, rather a whole host of problems. And there is a lot, and maybe some won't like that, but in the real world, there typically isn't just one thing going on. It's not just one person's behavior, it's the system that enables it. It's the way it affects people differently. And it's never just one person, one issue. All of the problems seem to be intermixed. They all kind of play off each other. And you can't really talk about one without talking about another. I like how this movie seems to show that support comes in different ways. Vivian's best friend, Claudia, is supportive, but who Claudia is and who her mother is, that makes it harder for her to show her support in the same way that Vivian can. Moxie's first print had supporters put hearts and stars on their hands to show support, and Vivian is clearly disappointed when she sees that Claudia doesn't have those hearts and stars. Later, a girl named Caitlin is singled out by the principal for wearing a tank top. The principal says it shows too much collarbone. She points out a girl next to her who's wearing the exact same style as her, but they obviously fill out the shirt differently. The principal then continues to ask her to cover up, to put on a shirt or a jacket. She even says, completely unaware of the irony, to cover up so that we can all get back to learning. Not even taking into account that she, the principal, had stepped into this class out of nowhere just to stop the teacher so she could tell a student in front of everyone to put on a jacket. Therefore, she's the one that is the interruption, not the girl who's just trying to learn. And then, because she doesn't have anything to cover up with, she pulls Caitlin out of class and sends her home. Also, a side note, but this is a situation I feel a lot of girls and women can relate to. Our bodies must always be covered up because guys cannot be responsible for paying attention if there's a girl near them with their shoulders showing. I always thought that was very weird in high school, that you couldn't have shoulders showing. Shoulders? So weird. But anyway, Vivian sees this happening and shares the story in the Moxie zine, calling out the hypocrisy of the situation, and then asks everyone to wear a tank top to show their support. Vivian and Lucy, of course, wear their tank tops, but Claudia shows up in a sweater. When Vivian asks her about it, Claudia feigns ignorance, stating she forgot it was that day. And she does not reveal to Vivian that she tried wearing one, but her mother made her change. This makes Vivian believe that Claudia doesn't support Moxie, and then by extension Vivian. However, later on we see Claudia support Moxie in a way that she's comfortable with. She registers the group of girls as an official club and gets a little bit more involved with the other ladies. This isn't a loud, in-your-face show of support like wearing the tank top was, but it's something that Claudia is comfortable with. And it's another way to show your support. There's never just one way. There's different ways we can all pitch in. And doing what you're comfortable with is the most important thing. We also discover that Claudia's reactions to how she sees the problems at her school is going to be, and in a way has to be, different than Vivian. She tells Vivian that she's not just a woman. She's never just a woman. She's simultaneously a woman who is not white and who is also the child of an immigrant. And that very fact changes how she can respond to certain situations. The pressure she is under is very different than the pressure Vivian is under. What her mom had to do to get her to be able to go to college is very different than what Vivian's mom had to go through. It's just another layer that she has to deal with that Vivian not only doesn't have to deal with, but has never even thought about. Moxie tends to show that both men and women can be part of the problem. We of course see guys like Mitchell and his friend Jason showcasing the unacceptable behaviors, from Mitchell's condescending attitude towards Lucy in class to Jason sneaking into a chair so Caitlin accidentally sits in his lap. And of course there's plenty of other examples, varying levels of terribleness. But we also see the way in which women can very easily contribute to the problem. Principal Shelley completely enables this behavior up until the final moments of the movie. When Lucy first comes to her office to complain about Mitchell, Principal Shelley downplays her worries. Lucy says that Mitchell has been harassing her, and Shelley immediately quiets her and tells her it sounds like he is simply bothering her. Even though she hasn't even heard what he has done, she takes away Lucy's voice, quite literally even, by cutting her off while she's trying to explain, and she bolsters Mitchell's without even hearing what happened. She even tries to convince Lucy that she's just being emotional, and then immediately tries to change the subject, telling her to sign up for the marching band, where she'd be directly supporting the classmate that she doesn't feel safe around. Moxie, the zine, calls her out on her enabling this behavior, and later, when there have been stickers placed around the school, Shelley is seen to be more upset about the defacing of property than why someone felt the need to create Moxie in the first place. On the flip side, it also shows that both men and women can be part of the solution. We need everyone if we want to make a difference. Ike Barinholtz plays the English teacher, and I really enjoy his character, which may be primarily because he's played by Ike Barinholtz, and who doesn't love Ike Barinholtz? But I also think it's because he was a decent character, and another way they showed how support can be different things to different people, and also that people can evolve. In the beginning, he was quiet, stating that he didn't want to say the wrong thing, which at that point I kind of understand in that particular situation, since he was a male teacher being asked to comment about whether or not the young girls could wear tank tops. And I could see that he maybe didn't want to misspeak or have his words taken out of context. But still, he chooses to kind of ignore the situation instead of standing up. But then at the end, we see he drew the star and heart on his palms to show he supported the walkout that Moxie had planned. He finally chooses to take a stand, and even though it's still quiet, much like Claudia's was still quiet, it's clear that he's supporting the cause. And once again, we get to see that not everyone's support is going to be written in big red paint in front of the school, but maybe a quiet and subtle black Sharpie on the palms of a hand. A message is a message, and they come in all forms and sizes. Another character who they show to be part of the solution is Seth. Seth is Vivian's love interest, and his support of Vivian never seems disingenuous. He's a great example of what being a good human being is. He constantly shows his support, from the Sharpie hearts and stars, to wearing a tank top, to walking out with everyone. He seems to very much value Vivian as a person, and it was so enjoyable to watch Seth continue to do the right thing. I also really loved how much he tried to get along with Vivian's mom and her mom's boyfriend, who's played by the amazing Clark Gregg, and has a name in this movie, but I will always refer to him as Phil Coulson. I also appreciate that since this is a movie / book, there has to be some kind of obstacle in the relationship. But I appreciate that the challenge they face is of her own making. They don't make him the bad guy, which would have been the easy way out in a film about feminism. They didn't twist his intentions or make him fake. What we saw was actually genuine in Seth. It is Vivian's inner turmoil and her lashing out that leads to the fallout. I liked how they handled this, because a lot of stories about feminism tend to fall flat by making every male in that story a bad person, which just feels like lazy writing. It doesn't accurately portray the world. Moxie is very realistic in that there are good guys out there, just like there are bad guys out there. And sometimes the bad guy is us. It's not them, even if we want it to be them. Like Vivian wanted it to be Seth and Phil Coulson. I really liked the way Vivian and Seth's relationship evolved. It felt very organic, and it had a good pace to it. He doesn't immediately ask her out, but instead talks to her to develop a base level of friendship before they go on a date. And it seems to be established that they knew each other growing up, but it also feels like they didn't just jump right into a relationship, but instead kind of developed a base, a foundation for them to grow a relationship out of. So there's this scene where Vivian and Seth have dinner with Lisa, the mom, and her boyfriend, Phil Coulson. It is pretty cringy, and it almost falls into the dislike category, but to be fair, I think it's actually meant to feel that way. I mean, for one, I know I was pretty cringy as a teen, and I'm sure most people feel that way about their younger selves. So in a way, it was kind of typical teen cringy stuff. Vivian is upset about what's going on at school. She had just come home from a fight with her best friend. She's upset because her mom has found someone, and she's upset that she brought her new boyfriend over. And it's all boiling over, and it's coming out in this weird and incredibly awkward feminist rant. Because, well, I believe she's ranting because she feels like this is something that she has a right to be angry about. That she can't possibly be wrong to be angry about the injustices in America. And even though her boyfriend has shown nothing but support, Her mom has shown nothing but support, and presumably Phil Coulson is a decent person if her mom is interested in him, and we haven't seen anything that proves that he isn't a nice dude. Also, I think his name is actually John. So even though everyone's shown support, she still is kind of lashing out and saying that she's alone in this, even forgetting about all of her Moxie friends at school, because she's just being a teen. She's just lashing out because she's upset and she needs to control something, controlling the level of closeness with others. And I do love the conversation that this explosion at dinner then leads to between her and her mom. It's just her spilling out everything that she's upset about and her mom just listening to her rant. It lets Vivian release some of the feelings she's been holding in and ultimately will let her undo some of the mistakes she's made. Like I mentioned in the Julie and the Phantoms episode, which you should go listen to if you haven't, but you probably have because you're already listening to this one. One of the worst things about teen movies and shows is that they're almost always played by actors in their 20s and 30s. Moxie is no different in that they're pretty much all in their early 20s, but they do genuinely look like high schoolers. I had to look up their ages and was surprised to see that they were pretty much all in their early 20s instead of being closer to 18. Maybe it's the clothes, maybe it's the makeup, but they are pretty believable younger people. So I'm allowing their use of older actors, since I guess that's up to me. Amy Poehler plays a great mom. I love the question she asked Vivian in the beginning when they're grocery shopping about school. She asks, "What did you learn today? What kind of person were you? What made you smile? And what were your biggest challenges?" She asks them in a way that makes it seem like these are definitely the standard questions she's asked Vivian in the past. Even though we learn she's a single mom who works long hours as a nurse, she still seems very involved in her daughter's life. She also talks to her daughter about her issues, but doesn't seem to ever try to solve them in a good way. We see Vivian tell Lisa about Caitlin being sent home, and while Lisa then talks about how she and her friends protested in high school, it doesn't seem like she's projecting that on her daughter or expecting her to do the same. She lets her daughter control her own response to it. When Vivian asks how she knew how to protest something, she tells her daughter that, well, they didn't know, and they made plenty of mistakes. But the entire conversation feels very natural. It's not judgmental, it doesn't have expectations. She's just talking to her daughter about her own life, as well as about what's going on in Vivian's life. Another character I really liked is the dude from the print shop. He doesn't question her, he doesn't judge her, he's just making copies of the zine for her. And he even cheers her on at one point. It's great. He's a very minor character, but I loved him. The music was also really great in this movie. There were definitely some solid choices throughout, and they really pumped you up and enhanced the Revolution themes with the Riot Girl songs. Also, just a quick little aside, we didn't see much of Claudia's room, but I absolutely loved her bookshelf, which of course I'm going to mention because this is a podcast where I also review books, and I obviously love them. She has some great YA choices on that bookshelf, like the To All the Boys I've Loved Before series, which I have only ever seen the movies, but I thought they were cute. She has the Darkest Mind series, which I absolutely loved. And I even saw Harry Potter and Percy Jackson, which you can't go wrong with either of those. Okay, so what I didn't like about this movie was that it was way better than I had assumed it was going to be. Which, as soon as Amy Poehler appeared on the screen, I figured, okay, well, this is going to be good if she's in it. And then I learned that she directed it, so of course it was way better than I expected, which I didn't really expect much because, like I said, I had never really seen much of it. This is a genuine question I have. Please let me know. Do people actually let their alarm just make sound in the morning? As soon as my brain recognizes a sound is going off, and this is even sometimes when I'm not aware of it, like consciously aware, I will turn off that alarm because I need it to just shut up. even when waking up to music I like. It literally does not matter. I will immediately turn it off. So it always pulls me out of whatever I'm watching when I see someone wake up with an alarm and it's just blaring and they're not even trying to shut it off. Maybe I'm just weird and not immediately turning off an alarm is just a normal reaction. But it is not my reaction. I think the biggest critique that I have was that race wasn't really mentioned. The cast is very diverse, and yet apart from the scene I mentioned before with Claudia, it seems that it isn't really touched on. I think it would have added that much more weight to the movie to be able to show that how Vivian faces sexism is much different than how Claudia faces it and how Lucy faces it. The way in which sexism is not only felt, but in how it is reacted to can vary widely when it comes to your race, your sexual orientation, your gender, amongst pretty much anything else. Sexism isn't the same across the board. Like with race, the sexism CJ faces as a transgendered woman is not really touched on either. They mention it in passing when CJ says that people still refuse to call her by her name. Then they just kind of move on and don't really address it again. Much like with race, it seems to be a topic they don't expand on or even have a full arc about it. It's just mentioned, and that's it. I will say that, like I mentioned at the start, this movie is based on a book, and that author is a white, straight, cis woman. And the director, Amy Poehler, is of course another white, straight, cis woman. And part of me thinks that they could have done more to address these other experiences, but another part of me thinks that those aren't really their stories to tell. So maybe addressing it how they did with a few comments is their way of showing that there are other facets to sexism without trying to write about experiences they have no firsthand knowledge of. Of course, authors write about plenty of things that they have no experience with, no firsthand knowledge of. Almost every story you come across will require someone to write a character who is not the same gender as them, or has a different sexual orientation, or is a different race, or holds a different job, or the list goes on. But I think there are some experiences that need to be authentic to work. And maybe this story with this author isn't the place to tell those experiences. Maybe there is no right answer here. I would certainly recommend this movie. I thought it had some great dialogue, some interesting characters, and it made some really good points. I will definitely put the book on my reading list, and of course, I will look forward to anything Amy Poehler touches. And there you have it. Those are my thoughts on Moxie. Thank you so much for joining me. You can find me on Instagram and Facebook at Mixed Media Reviews, and you can also find me anywhere you find your podcasts, as long as that is Anchor, Google Podcasts, Spotify, Breaker, or Radio Public. Please let me know if you have any recommendations of TV shows, movies, books, or anything else, any other kind of media. Please join me next week where I'll be reviewing a book, There's Someone Inside Your House by Stephanie Perkins. Have a wonderful rest of the day. Bye!